You're in Braves country.
Hey, howdy, hi, and how the hell are you, Braves country? And look at the bright side, Falcons fans. Dan Quinn's heading to the Washington football team. Is not going to haunt the Falcons again for a while. And I guess you can make an argument it's good news for Cowboy fans after the way their defense played in that playoff game. But this is a baseball show, and we'll get into that here today. We're going to talk about the bullpen. We're going to talk about the options that we will have with the rotation, how deep it needs to be, Max Fried extension rumors, and what kind of effect Chris Sale could have on that. Guys that are coming back that we have not seen in a while, guys like Huascar Ynoa and Tyler Matzik. And the idea of some things that were talked about at the Braves Fan Fest in the manner of how to approach the postseason, the entire season, to get better results. And also, we'll dive into a couple of other things. Starting next week, we're going to get into PECOTA projections for all of Major League Baseball. Try to kind of give you an idea as they are being released, give you an idea of what to expect from different teams around Major League Baseball this year. And what effect Amazon could have on your Braves viewing. So we'll get into all that, and let's go ahead and dive into the news and notes of Braves country today. One of the first things I do want to talk about before I get sidetracked and forget that this was a part of the Braves signing last week, the international signing of Jose Perdomo. Now, look, he's unproven. He's a teenager. He's a shortstop, but they did give him a $5 million deal. I've listened to several broadcasts of guys that are considered experts in the international signing. And what I can tell you is this. They believe, now, take this with a grain of salt. We're a long way away from ever seeing him step onto an Atlanta Braves or Major League Baseball field. But as of right now in 2024, they believe that Jose Perdomo is a kid that has the highest ceiling of all the international signings this year. But once again, he's a teenager. You can't expect him to have any kind of real impact on the Major League roster for at least 2 years. Now, if they can get him ready to roll and bridge over towards when at the end of Orlando Arcia's deal, remember he still has a couple of years left, and maybe he's not ready to roll into a starting role by 2026, it would be very impressive if he was. At that point, I think he'd be 19, 20 years old. But let's say that he's able to make it by 2027, 2028. Then you could either extend Arcia, or if Arcia wants to go elsewhere, fair enough. And if that's the case, you would have a very affordable option coming up down the pipe. Right now, we know that what Orlando Arcia is. He is a phenomenal defensive shortstop. And if you don't know that, if you don't see that, I don't know what to tell you. I do these games, and just like y'all watch these games, I also watch a lot of other baseball games. It is my absolute obsession in life is Major League Baseball. And you tend to forget how spoiled we are on a day in and day out basis getting to see Orlando Arcia defensively. We know offensively he struggles. And that I think that will always be the case with Orlando. There's times where he gets hot. There are also times where you feel like he's going to come up with the big hit. In big moments, he tends to dial it up, and you love that about him. He was flat in October, and we all know what was said and whether or not you believe that fired up the Philadelphia fan base, and more importantly, whether or not it fired up Bryce Harper. That could be debated. I don't think Bryce Harper needed something like that to fire him up. He is a very competitive guy in general. But with that being said, even with the faults that he had going into that series, in the middle of that series, whether you think it cost him, it really is here nor there. He tends to step up in big moments. And Orlando Arcia, I think the way that he can take that next step, people talking about Orlando Arcia as far as how was he an all-star? There was a lot of shade thrown on him, right? First of all, first half of the season offensively, he was very good. It was also a down year for the shortstop in the National League. Let's not overlook that. But I'll take Orlando Arcia at the rate that we get him on our roster. I'll take that 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. What you would love to see from Orlando is for him to take the next step offensively. And I don't think he gives away at bats, but it does seem like he goes in to at bats late in games when the game's on the line with a much better approach. So I don't know if you want to call that giving away at bats, but I would like to see his first and second at bats to be productive ones, and he doesn't necessarily have to slam the ball out of the ballpark. But you'd like to see him move the runners along. This year, there's a very good chance he's going to be our number 9 hitter. But he is a phenomenal defensive shortstop. So the point about Perdomo is hopefully Arcia can bridge that gap until Perdomo is ready, or there's a number of other kids already in the organization, but they're very high. Not just the Braves, everyone in Major League Baseball who follows the international pool is very, very high on Jose Perdomo. Something else I wanted to throw at you. So Major League Baseball, they put out a what do you want to call it? A little meme or a graphic, I guess is more accurate, of the best, basically an all-star team of the free agents remaining. Listen to some of these names that are still out there on the open market. And you do wonder where they are going to end up and what kind of deals they will end up with. I know that a lot of us would love to see, if you missed it, by the way, Jock Peterson has signed. He's signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I know he's a fan favorite and one of my favorite players that I'll ever see. I almost kind of never want to see him back in a Braves uniform because it was such a magical time when he was with us. I would hate to see him 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years later in his career where he's really fallen off and you don't get that. There was such a storybook part of our Braves fandom that will always include Jock Peterson and what he did for that very short period of time. I don't think you can say the same for Jorge Soler and Adam Duvall, who were on their graphic and are free agents as we begin February. I think those two guys are legitimate everyday starter type players in Major League Baseball. Even Duvall at his age, I still think if he's not an everyday starter, he is one heck of a guy that's going to be in a rotation getting 3 to 4 starts a week. So I doubt that he's going to fit in the Braves' plans. Would I love to have Duvall? You betcha. Now remember, they brought in JP Martinez in the trade with the Rangers. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're done adding players, because you got to look at it big picture. First of all, JP is a lefty. Second of all, he's 27. He's only had 40 at-bats in the major leagues. That's not really someone you're going to hang a hat on. You're going to hope you get something out of it, but it's not someone you're going to really hang a hat on. They gave up a relief pitcher because it is a position of strength in the Braves organization at this point, that they could give up a reliever to go get an outfielder. But remember, they did this with several other players last year that came in, and you had high hopes and you saw glimpses, and they may very well look. JP very may well have some important innings and some important games, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's through. But right now, this outfield is still out there. Jorge Soler, Cody Bellinger, and Adam Duvall. I do believe all three of them are going to command more money per year than what the Braves have left to spend. The only argument you could make is possibly Adam Duvall. If he really wanted to come in on a lower range, a 1-year deal, because he enjoyed, and I do know that he enjoyed his time in Atlanta. You can't argue that. He talks about it all the time. I could see that happening. I don't see it happening for Jorge Soler. First of all, where's Soler going to play every day, right? That's number one. Second of all, Jorge Soler is young enough where he's still looking for a 3-4 year deal. And if he does sign a deal, even if it's a 1-year deal or like a multiple year deal with opt-outs, you're talking about a much higher AAV. Essentially, what do the Braves have to spend right now as we go into the spring without hitting that third level of salary, where not only are we going to lose a draft pick, which I know Anthopoulos does not want, but the other thing is the next tax bracket that you hit is going to be astronomical. So they're going to stay under that. So they've got, if you do the math, it's a rough math because of arbitration. We'll say around $6 million plus left. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. I've seen some argue that it's a little over 7. I've seen some argue that it's just under 7, but we'll say, just to be safe, 6. But you have to take into consideration they want some kind of a buffer, because what if they have to go make a trade at the trade deadline? And yeah, they could offset it with trading other people away, but what if they have to make a trade at the trade deadline, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter? You never know how these players' health is going to go. Relatively speaking, we were healthy on the everyday players for the last few years. Been very fortunate with that. We have had some bumps and bruises. Obviously, Ozzy and then Acuna finally getting back right and getting healthy. But top to bottom, you got to like the fact that realistically, we've been pretty healthy. We've been pretty fortunate in that aspect. But you just never know with the baseball gods what kind of cards they're going to deal you. So you got to have some kind of, I know, look, as a fan, I want to go, screw that. Let's go all in. Let's trade them away. Let's go for it. But then you forget that when you do that, if things don't work out just right, you could really destroy what you've built up. So that number one with the bullet has to be realized. Anyone that the Braves bring in, it's probably going to be somewhere around. It's either going to be a minor league with the chance to make the MLB team, or more likely, if you do sign a more notable name, it's going to be at a minimum deal, a veteran minimum, which I believe right now is right around the $1 million mark. And I don't see them signing more than one of those type guys. I do think they'll sign 2 or 3 total to try to build some depth in that outfield, but one on a veteran minimum, and then they'll probably go out and try to get a couple of guys that could contribute but are going to come in on minor league prove it deals. So Duvall, I doubt it. I would love it because of his versatility, because he can play all over the outfield, every single position, giving days off, or also just giving you depth in case of injury, but giving days off to everyone in that outfield. And he's a right-handed bat. So if I could just put the magic wand out there and say, this is who I want, please let's go get him, with the understanding that he's also going to sign at an affordable rate, Adam Duvall would be the one that I would want. Jorge Soler just isn't realistic because of the simple fact that Jorge Soler wants a multi-year deal, a big-time multi-year deal. If he doesn't do that, he's going to do something where there's an opt-out. But regardless, this year's AAV is going to crush that $6 million mark, you would think, considering what he has signed over the last few and what he has made over the last few. Cody Bellinger, forget about that's not happening. Your infield guys that are still available, and I just bring these up, not that we're really looking for anyone at that point. By the way, let's also not forget that Adam Duvall over his career has also played third base and first base. So just his depth is unbelievable. And you might get a discount because he was banged up for a lot of the year last year. Remember, he came out on fire when he first jumped out there with the Red Sox last year, and then he had a pretty significant injury that kept him out about 2 months. He came back and he was hitting fine, but he was on a torrid pace right before he got injured. The infield, these are guys who are expected to, command some money. Matt Chapman, the third baseman, is still out there. We keep an eye on that. Brandon Bell is a light-hitting first baseman, but he does have a great glove. He does give you professional at-bats. But I do believe he wants to start somewhere. I really do. The other guy in the infield, Tim Anderson, good luck with that. That guy's been an absolute cancer in the locker room, and he had a terrible 2024. And wherever he goes, he's going to want to go reset his market, so he wants to be the starting shortstop. I don't think he's going to get a big deal, mainly because he has been a jerk. Jose Ramirez told him to literally introduced him to mess around and find out. But wherever Tim Anderson goes, I guarantee you can expect this from Tim Anderson. He's going to go somewhere on a non-contender to try to reset his market, and maybe he becomes a trade deadline option for somebody. Whit Merrifield is another one. Now, he would be a great ad, but once again, he's probably going to be too expensive for the likes of the Braves. This man has played outfield, all over the outfield in his career, and second base. Has good speed, but he is still an everyday player in Major League Baseball, so I doubt he's even on an Atlanta radar. Gary Sanchez had a very good year behind the plate last year, so we keep an eye on that. Where he ends up at, obviously the Braves are set there. And as far as the best bullpen guy right now, Jacob Junis is still out there. Can you believe that we are in February and the reigning National League Cy Young winner, Blake Snell, is out there? I think he probably gets signed in the very near future. Hell, who knows? As I'm speaking right now, he could be getting signed. We just don't know it yet. But JD Martinez is the designated hitter, the one that jumps out at you. I'm a little surprised that now look, he's long in the tooth. We get that. He had a pretty good year last year. So I'm a little surprised that he's still out there. But if you ask me to rank, we'll just say the top 3 surprises, obviously Jordan Montgomery is out there for me. That's because I'm a big Jordan Montgomery fan. I would have loved to have seen the Braves add him, but I'm not going to complain about Chris Sale. That was a great ad. And what they got for him, and if they can keep Chris Sale healthy, more on that in a second. But Chris Sale is, if you get him anywhere close to where he was before all these little goofy, random nagging injuries have made him an afterthought the last few years. You get him anywhere close to that. If the 2018, 2019 seasons were where he was unhittable, lights out, unbelievable, and the best in the game, if that's the 100% mark, if we get him in 80% of that, I'll be doing backflips. Well, maybe not me, but maybe some of y'all who can actually do a backflip without breaking their neck. But if I was to rank it, Jordan Montgomery surprises me because I just think he's a dog. I think what has hurt him is that he proved how valuable he was in the postseason, and he is just a postseason guy. But because he doesn't have blow you away type of velocity, the analytic dorks are going to try to tell you he's not worth the money. But folks that have to hit against him, play against him, compete against him are going to tell you you're insane. Blake Snell, his problem is he's never really been that durable. He doesn't go deep into games. One of the funniest stats about Blake Snell is he has 2 more Cy Youngs, because he has 2 more Cy Youngs in his career than he does complete games. Now, that's not that big of a stat anymore because every guy gets ran by the 7th, 8th inning, but it is alarming, especially when you look at he's only gone over the 100 inning mark a couple of times in his career. But when he's on and when he's dealing, Blake Snell, even as big of a doofus and a jerk as he's been, especially I think about the year of the COVID where he just shot his mouth off and said some really stupid things. Really turned off a lot of fans that, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, basically he was saying that he wanted to get paid a lot more money to go out and play baseball because there was only going to be a 60-game season. And he didn't like the fact that he wasn't getting 100% of his salary. And I won't go into the whole thing, but there's a lot of eye rolls. Because those of us that lived through this, we all remember 2020 was brutal for everybody financially. And for a guy to complain about how many millions he's going to make, really just, it fell flat. So he's kind of been a doofus when it comes to that. But, you age, get a little wiser. I doubt I'll ever be a Blake Snell fan, but I could see me being softer about my disdain for Blake Snell. But he's phenomenal. You can't, he's the reigning Cy Young. That's the thing. And he's a lefty. A southpaw Cy Young, that's something special. It's the fact that him and Montgomery, I think if you asked me, well, who's the third guy, it's got to be Cody Bellinger. I do believe he ends up back in Chicago. I think there's a waiting game with this. I think he's the best fit for the Cubs. And there's not really there's not a guy you can put in his position that's going to give you the same kind. And not to mention, I don't know if y'all saw this or not, but Dansby Swanson recently went to bat for him and basically said, we got to have him back. So I think that carries a lot of weight in that locker room in that city. To me, it's a little odd that Jorge Soler hasn't gotten a fair deal yet from somebody. You know, these teams that were going all in on Ohtani and whatnot. And look, I don't know what he's asking for, and that's the key. But Jorge Soler is a legitimate 30-plus home run guy. He's not going to hit for a high average, but a legitimate 30-plus home run guy, and he can play solid defense in left field. And man, that home run in Game 6 of the 2021 World Series, I'm telling you right now, there is no way that anyone will ever get me to say a bad thing about Jorge Soler because of that home run. And really, that entire run, he had a couple other big home runs. I think about the one that turned the game around in the series in Atlanta, in the games in Atlanta. I'm trying to remember if that was Game 3 or Game 4, but he had the home run, the solo shot, and that was a big deal. You know, between him and Rosario and Jock Peterson, it is a season of magic that we'll never forget. Literally caught magic in a bottle, lightning in a bottle. Years later, there are going to be fans that are going to come in and they're going to say, well, what was it like, the 2021 team compared to the 95 team? They were vastly different because the 95 team was finally, we get that World Series that we felt like we should have had a few years before. Whereas the 2021 team, you get the injury with Acuna and whatnot, and then you get these trades that come in and they just happen to work. That was a phenomenal season that you can't quantify unless you sat down and watched the games and understood that season and understood how bleak it looked in June and July. You'll never understand how a breath of fresh air by Jock Peterson. Remember, he was the first one that came in. And then we got Soler along with Rosario. But if you remember, Rosario didn't play for the first few weeks because he was coming off of injury. And lo and behold, they all caught fire at some point. It really is amazing. Peterson carried us to victory. I'm not going to say just him, but I'm saying that he hit center stage in the NLDS. Then in the NLCS, it was Rosario playing out of his mind. And then the World Series, you get Jorge Soler. And it wasn't like the other two during those series where they weren't, you know, the MVP. It wasn't like they were playing terribly. They were doing something. So I don't understand the lack of love for Jorge Soler, and I'm sure a lot of y'all probably feel that same way. I hope he doesn't end up in our division, is all I hope, because when he was playing with the Marlins, I hated it. He coming to bat, I'm like, man, I hate pulling against this guy. And you see him more often, and he is a dangerous bat. It amazes me that someone hasn't. It amazes me that a Toronto Blue Jays has not come out and said, we missed out on Ohtani. Let's go get some Soler. Can you imagine Jorge Soler in the Boston Red Sox uniform peppering the left field wall, the Green Monster? My God. And wait, what are the Red Sox doing? If I'm a Red Sox fan, I am furious. Absolutely furious. Other things to get into. So if you look at, first of all, Anthopoulos absolutely put to bed all the talk about, well, why didn't we go after Dylan Cease? Why didn't we go after Dylan Cease? And we tried to tell you at the time, because you could just read the tea leaves of what he was saying in previous interviews. But the question was, why were you not able to do anything with Dylan Cease? They are asking too much for Dylan Cease. And I'm going to make a claim right now. If the Chicago White Sox do not move Dylan Cease before opening day of this year, it will be a terrible job by that organization. I'll tell you why. If they say, well, we're trying to get the moon and the stars and we're not getting it, so we're going to wait till the deadline. We're going to wait till 1 year desperate. First of all, whatever you would have gotten before opening day to get 2 full years of control over Dylan Cease, it's going to be marginally different. Substantially different is what I should say. Because there's a big difference between the last 2 months of this season and 1 more year and he's gone, as opposed to 2 full seasons. Maybe we might even be able to get him extended by the All-Star break of this year. So that's number one. Number two, this is the more obvious. He had a really bad 2023. And what if he goes out and has another, doesn't have to be terrible, we'll just say middle of the road 2024. Now you're really behind the 8 ball, because now you have 1.5 years of blah that you're trying to trade away, as opposed to the 1 year outlier and go, look, he had a bad year, but you can get him in there. We know he's got the stuff. Let's go. And now whoever makes the trade can no longer get him into spring training and work on him and say, look, we're going to take a look at what could be ailing you, why you're not pitching as well, and maybe we'll try this, maybe we'll try that. You get him at the trade deadline, that's not happening. That is absolutely not happening, because what you're going to do at that point is you're going to end up with a guy coming in on the fly, however he's pitching, we're going to try to get him through this, and then in the offseason, we'll try to fix him. So instantly, if he's having a bad year, unless he's out there, one of the Cy Young candidates, will be a terrible, terrible gamble on their side. Here's the other thing. This is the more obvious thing. What if the dude just gets injured? Injuries happen all the time in sports. It doesn't even have to be a major injury. I'm not talking about Tommy John. But what if down the stretch in June, early July, all of a sudden he's got a calf strain that holds him out? All of a sudden he's got what they call it, shoulder impingement, forearm strain. All of a sudden bells start going off. You go, uh-oh, this guy's damaged goods. Let's get the hell out of here. And so you're going to have a real problem. White Sox need to trade Dylan Cease realistically in the next month to get their full value. If they hold on, they're buffoons. That team is not the Chicago White Sox are not competing for a division this year. And I think they were foolish not to take advantage of the Braves at one point when the Dodgers went out and got Glasnow, and they went out and got Shohei Ohtani, and a little bit of an arms race. And look, the Braves bounced back and they landed on their feet and got Chris Sale, but they would have loved to have had a younger option in Dylan Cease. But Anthopoulos was not going to sell the farm. And I'm glad we have a general manager that doesn't go, well, let's go out here and give away 3 or 4 of our top prospects for a guy who's going to be here for 2 years who just had a crappy year. And let's hope and let's pray that he figures it out. And as he figures it out, let's hope and pray that we can extend him somehow. So as opposed to Dylan Cease for the next 2 years, we got Chris Sale for the next 3. And don't sleep on the fact that Chris Sale signing that extension takes a lot of pressure off of Chris. And he doesn't feel like he's got to go out and be king ding-a-ling every single time he hits the mound, which means he's not going to push himself, which means I believe he's going to have a much better year. You look at some of the things, by the way, just a signing note. If you missed this, the San Francisco Giants signed Jordan Hicks to a 4-year, $44 million deal. They're going to try to move him from the bullpen back to the rotation. That'll be interesting. And at the same token, Marcus Stroman, I can't remember if we've talked about this recently or not. Marcus Stroman, 2-year, $32 million deal with the Yankees, which is really funny because he trashed the Yankees on social media a few years back. But anyways, they ended up signing him. I think that's going to be a disastrous pick. I really do. I think he's going to be a problem. I think he's a me guy. And the Yankees, for all the faults that they've had over the last few years, they've had a pretty tight locker room. And unless maybe he has grown the hell up and understands that it's not all about him. But he was a disaster in New York. You ask any Mets fan, they can't stand Marcus Stroman. You ask any Cubs fan who just watched him pitch, no one wanted him back. Not at any kind of a real rate. Like, obviously you go, well, if I can get him on the trash heap on a discount, sure. But those were 2 of the bigger signings that have happened over the last few days. The other thing that did want to hit up on this one is you look at what's going on in spring training. And by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're well aware of it, but the spring training schedule is slowly being leaked out. And as of right now, the only Braves game that is being televised, and those are the only games that we do. There's a number of reasons why we do it, but number one, most fans like to listen to our broadcast as they watch the game. So the only game right now that's being televised is the Braves versus Phillies, February 28th. It's a Wednesday. It's a 1:05 first pitch. We will bring that to you here on Braves Country Radio. If you're listening to us on radio and you haven't found us before, Braves Country Radio, find us. Best place to find us on YouTube. It's where we do everything, but we do have a Facebook page as well where we do some broadcasts. We're probably going to expand that a little bit this year, but we do every single game on YouTube. It's free. Just like and subscribe and jump into the chat. And I think you'll enjoy the season much more as a part of the Braves Country community. We have a lot of fun. With that, and we will start it on the 28th. Now, we could have a game before that, but nothing's been released. I think by Super Bowl week or the week after the Super Bowl, as Pitchers and Catch Report, I think we'll have pretty much is usually when everybody releases their television schedule. But as of right now, only a few teams have released their television schedule. The Braves have not. A lot of this has to do with the whole Bally's thing, and Amazon looks like that they're going to step up, and it shouldn't affect people watching MLB TV, but it remains to be seen. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. I don't know if it will affect it down the road, years down the road, but as of this year, it should not affect. If you consume MLB.TV to watch your Braves games, you should be in the clear. As far as the Bally Sports, I don't know how that'll work locally. I don't know if you would just need to cancel your subscription with Bally Sports and go jump on Amazon. I don't know how that works, but it looks like that it's going to be a thing. We're waiting to get all the details, but right now there's talks and pretty heavy rumors on it. So we push that aside, and if you're looking at one of the things that they talked about was obviously last 2 years, Braves get a bye. Last 2 years, the Braves are bouncing the first round. And I'm glad that the narrative wasn't focused on, well, how do you beat the Phillies? Because I don't believe it was because they played the Phillies. Maybe 2022. Phillies were extremely hot, and we saw that all the way to the World Series. But all in all, I felt like it was more of the Braves not showing up as opposed to the Phillies being the better team. And they talk about a lot of things. One of the things that Spencer Strider, I love the fact that he hit it head on and talked about it's a problem and we got to fix it. And I think one of the things he's really just talking about is the attitude of the games down the stretch to make sure you know that iron sharpens iron, that we're going out there and competing. But I think one of the things that they need to do more than anything else, and you never hear it talked about, I guess because nobody wants to say a bad thing against Snicker ever. But the idea that these guys play every single day, I just think that's a problem. And I know all the guys say they want to do it, and I get that. But that's why you're the manager. That's why you're the general manager. You're supposed to tell them, we appreciate the fact that you want to play 19 games in a row in the middle of June. But we believe you need a day or two off in there to keep yourself fresh. Not just to keep you healthy, but also that when you are playing, that you are giving it your best, giving it your all. You don't have the aches and pains. You can't have a bunch of Cal Ripken Juniors out there, because by the time, something that a lot of people don't think about with Cal Ripken Jr. is that the older he got, the later in the season, look, he's an all-timer because of what he did. But his statistics were not nearly as impressive, and you had to contribute that to the fact that he was playing every single day. And he talked about it after he retired, the bumps and bruises, the aches and pains. My idea would be this. For all of the everyday players, not counting catcher because they do a pretty good job of splitting time with them. But Austin Riley, Orlando Arcia, Ozzie Albies, Matt Olson, Acuna, Harris, and now it looks like Jared Kelenic is going to be the everyday left fielder. It doesn't look like it's going to be a true platoon, whoever they bring in. Every month, I would like to see every single one of those guys ride the pine at least 2, maybe even 3 times a month. You're talking about in a given month that they'll typically play somewhere between 25. We'll just average it out around 25 games a month. It wouldn't hurt to at least have 2 of those days off. It's going to keep you a hell of a lot fresher. Not just for the postseason, which I think would be a direct response to it, but also, what about the end game, the end season? Acuna gets a Monday off because they just played a Sunday night game. I bet you Tuesday he comes out flying. Here's something else that I don't think we ever really think about, that I have, but I don't think a lot of people think about. Well, how do we catch lightning in the bottom? And I don't want to hear this. It's random, because it's not random. You either go in with the game plan and you may fail, but it's not random who plays well. Here's the idea that I've got. When we won it all in 2021, who are the heroes from that? I'm not counting the bullpen. Who are the heroes? NLDS, it was Jock Peterson. NLCS, it was Rosario, which we just talked about the fact that he was on the IL and didn't play until like mid-August. So he was fresh. Peterson came over in a trade. He was fairly fresh. Jorge Soler, he was fresh. All three of these guys did not start the season with the Atlanta Braves. I don't think it's an accident that those were the guys that were hitting their stride in the postseason. I'm not saying you got to go out and make a trade. What I'm saying is treat it the way most teams do, which is we don't expect you to play 155, 160 games a year. Because a 162 game season that is played from April to September, that is a grind. Let's keep them fresh. The last thing we want to hit up, talk more about this next week as far as the actual competition, but the Braves going into the rotation this year, or this spring, we're going to need around 11 plus starting pitchers. Now, the biggest interesting part of the entire spring to me is who gets that number 5. I don't believe Bryce Elder is leader in the clubhouse type of thing, his spot to lose, but I do think he's going to get every opportunity to be the starter because of what he did in the first half of 2023. I think Huascar Ynoa most likely starts the season down on the farm unless he really knocks it out of the park. And I believe Ronaldo Lopez is going to start in the bullpen. But we'll see how it's done. If you just look at the numbers over his career, Ronaldo Lopez is much more filthy when he's in the bullpen than when he's a starting. When he's a starting pitcher, he's literally just a little above an opener because that second going into the third time through the lineup, though he's got incredible gas, folks adjust to it. So I personally, selfishly, want him to be in the bullpen because I think it's going to be better. I think it's going to be phenomenal having the bullpen. I don't know what he wants. If he says he's okay with either, but does he really want to be a starter or is he really okay with being a reliever? I think the sky's the limit for this man to be a reliever. He could be the bridge that eventually becomes the closer. And the last thing that we'll hit, because we're going to have a lot to talk about with the bullpen and everything and different options. We'll probably get into that next week. Max Fried extension talk. Max Fried. Now, I heard someone throw out there the 22. They're stuck on the 22 million number because they know that that's where Anthopoulos has signed most guys, right, as a ceiling. And the idea was go out there and sign him to a 22-a-year deal, 5-year deal. Okay, that's 110. Max Fried's not coming in unless he just terrified of getting injured. He's not coming in at 5 years, 110. It's not going to happen. He would be foolish to do it. He's 6 months away from free agency, where he will be able to command possibly a 5-year 150 at 30 a year, maybe even more if you look at, look, Carlos Rodon made more. And I'll take Max Fried over Carlos Rodon 8 days a week, 25 hours a day. I believe his was 5 for 161 or 165. It was somewhere in that neighborhood. The point is, his floor, if he makes it free agent, is 5 for 150. So the only way that they get him signed, I believe the number would have to be 5 for about 135 at the lowest. 140 is probably more reasonable. But I do believe the only way you get him in there is because he realizes a couple things. A, I don't think the Dodgers are going to be looking for their free agent big fish next season. They're going to do what they did last year, and it's going to be a little quiet because they're set. They are set. They'll have Ohtani in the rotation next year. You got Glasnow, you got Buehler, you got Bobby Miller. I mean, look, that team is loaded. They're going to have other holes to fill other than going out and throwing $30 million a year at a pitcher. So that's number one. So if going home is not the option, realizing that and thinking to yourself, man, I could sign myself 5 years, 130 to 140, somewhere in that neighborhood, and be done with this and set for life. And if I get a injury this year, it doesn't knock me out of the park. Remember, they were worried when he first hit the IL last year, and he ended up missing a couple of months, which was brutal. But they thought good old-fashioned forearm strain could be heading to Tommy John. What if that happens again to him? He's already had one Tommy John surgery. If he has to have a second, first of all, he's not getting much of a deal for 2025 because that thing will be cashed. And he's going to have to look at signing basically as a discount in 26, because that's the year that you're going to come back and kind of like, you're really talking about then either signing a 2 to 3 year prove it deal, maybe opt out, but at that point you're in your mid 30s. Or if you were to sign a 5-year deal on a Tommy John or any kind of, shoulder surgery, anything like that, we're talking about at that point what? We're talking about at best 5 years, 90 to 100, because he's punting a couple of years away. So that's why I say, if they're going to do it, by the way, they got to get it done within the next month or so. They get to opening day, it's not happening, and he's not re-signing with the Braves unless an injury. And at that point, do we really want him? So there's the thoughts on that. Okay, we're gonna jam out of here. I think I've hit all the major things. Next week we'll talk a little more bullpen. What is Tyler Matzik going to bring? What are the expectations there? What are the expectations from some of the other guys that we've brought in, Bummer and whatnot? We're gonna focus on the bullpen next week. Y'all have a great one, Braves country. God, dog it. This is from now until the end of October. We know we're going to have Major League Baseball every month. Possibility, do we actually get some games in November as well? But we know baseball season is here.
You're in Braves country.